Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This important program series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of a state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for 60 years.
Town & Country magazine called my guest the greatest wedding photographer of our day. Harper's Bazaar said he's the best of the best. The New York Times said a storyteller with a camera, the hottest wedding photographer of the moment. And American Photo, they're the pros, said America's premier wedding photographer. Now you're probably saying, well, Gus's guest must be someone from New York or Los Angeles. No. He's Denis Reggie from Crowley, Louisiana. Hello, young man.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks so much.
I called him young man. I saw my guest today raised.
Yes, you did.
in his home in Crowley, Louisiana.
No stories from way back then, please, Gus.
You got it. Denis, how in the name of goodness did you get into the photography business?
Well, actually, I think somewhat by accident. You know, I was always active in sports, as were so many of the Reggies, all of us growing up in Crowley. And I actually had weak thumbs, and I can't blame my parents for that, but for some reason weak ligaments, and I couldn't play football when I was a sophomore. So I wanted to hang around with the football team, and I asked the coach, and he said, listen, son, you can be the water boy or the team photographer. And of course, I knew nothing about a camera, but I got interested in it, and actually, my father's good friend, Danny Abramowitz, the Saints
offensive
player.
coordinator for the Saints.
Oh, right, nowadays he is. He's great. I remember him as number 46, you know, the legend.
Right.
He was just so tremendous and a real good friend of our families. And he saw me reading all the photo magazines, and he said, I've got an old camera, an old Kodak camera back at the house I'm going to give to you so you can pick this up. Of course, that was, you know, gold, you know, gold nugget. So he gave me this camera, and I started studying it and reading. This is when I was 15 and a half, 16 years old, and got more and more interested in it, but all of it initially photographing sports. And that's actually where I learned, I guess, more the right brain. Of course, the left brain is learning technical and all the scientific points, but the right brain of intuition really, which I use now in my wedding photography, is rooted in my sports photography. From the sidelines, learning to anticipate whether it's going to be a run or a pass or go to the left or right.
Let me ask you a question, Denis. You're folks who are so oriented towards business, law. What did they encourage you or say, Denis, don't be silly?
What did they say or what did they feel? My parents were so encouraging, and I thank them over and over for that, because it was a strange duck thing to do. I mean, you know, I'm raised in a family where, you know, law school was sort of expected or whatever. Or just they wanted us to be happy, which is the most important. And they certainly proved that by their tolerance with their third child's interest in doing this sort of unusual thing, which is to photograph, and early on not even sure what I was going to photograph, but later weddings.
You opened a little shop in Crowley. I think you said the rent was $30 a month.
And had tough times meeting it every month in 1976.
Kind of pictures did you take?
Anything that would pay $1 or $2. I think passport pictures, babies, which is always the toughest for me. I would hang myself out of an airplane if they pay me for aerial photography. Anything that would earn any income, portrait work, and just you know, good small-time Crowley photography. Occasionally, the big city, we go to Lafayette to do something. Kenny Habits and I started together. We're still best of friends.
When did it dawn on you? This is always fascinating to me, how a man meets his destiny, and that camera given to you by Danny Abramowitz, you met your destiny. When did you begin to say, this maybe is what I want to do with my life?
Probably 2 or 3 years into it. I photographed my first cousin's wedding, Sammy Reggie's daughters, Donna, and then Mary Beth, and then Yvonne, Marguerite. And I was there, and Sammy said, you know, Denis, to me the most wonderful moments are not these posed ones, but maybe the ones you just find that just happen. And that fascinated me even at age 17 or whatever I was, 18 at the time. And it wasn't until a few years into it professionally, after 1976 or so, where I thought, having gone to a wedding actually once as a guest and not a photographer, and I watched the way the photographer worked, and I had the sense that this photographer felt that his mandate was to lead the wedding, to orchestrate each moment. Even on the dance floor, Gus, it was father and daughter, not having a wonderful moment, but rather one that's interrupted by the photographer saying, look here, give me a smile. And I thought, what if I take my sports photographer's mindset, go to a wedding from the sidelines, watch through my long lens, anticipate, sense, feel, and then ultimately to document moments that just happen naturally. Like my Uncle Sammy told me years before, to find moments that really were the most telling. That was my mission. I guess it was about in the 78 or so, after my couple of years professionally, then I thought, I'm going to try to pursue wedding photography without the posing, without the
So you were going to do it
expected.
like nobody had ever done it.
I was the crazy, yeah.
Were you conscious that you were fooling with something new?
It was bizarre because other professionals at meetings and seminars would say, that's not going to work. You know, brides won't go for that. They want more direction. They want to be holding the bouquet and gazing off in the distance in some type of a, I guess, a pseudo Hallmark card type of an image. And I think some people want that, but my thought was, hey, why not black and white? Why not of the moment? Why not without even an awareness by the subject that I'm even photographing them? And
so
it was
you
bizarre.
invent this concept called wedding photojournalism.
That's what I called it 15 or 16, 17 years ago now. And I called it that because to me it meant the wedding photographer would be the journalist, the person that's there to report the news and not to make the news, to find moments and tell the real story with sensitive photographs that to me are beautiful. People, I think, photograph best when they're not aware of the camera. I had no idea that all these celebrities and all these others would have this an unbelievable fascination with this particular niche, because I'd never met a celebrity or anything like that, but suddenly the phone began to ring from people that thought, you're that guy in Louisiana that photographs weddings without posing, and things sort of led from there.
Let me ask you this. Since you have conceived of this idea and have now done it, you're the leader in the field so successfully, are other photographers doing it? I'm just curious about that.
I'm thrilled that they do. I'm flattered by their willingness to sort of pursue things this way. I think, and my thought's always been actually, that the bride wins here. The bride can now go to her wedding and just be a bride, not be Christy Brinkley for a day.
Will there be any other tinkering with it in your thought process as you have mastered this instrument, this camera, and you have this concept? Is that the end, or is there a possibility that if I should do this interview with you 5 years down the road, you would be talking about something completely different?
I'd say that my thought process never stops, and I'm continuing to develop different thoughts and ideas. Technology continues to develop. You know, we're using film now, but of course if we talk in 5 years, and I'd love to, by the way, it may be digital. It may not even involve film. It may be something electronic. And with new technology comes the ability to do things that we couldn't do before. Nowadays, I can do weddings with just the candlelight. I remember that. Instead of having to always have the flash, which can be obtrusive, but I'll minimize the output, of course, when I absolutely have to have it. But to nowadays take technology and work with just candlelight, to me.
Do you do your own darkroom work?
I train the guy that's been with me for 18 years that does it for me now and does a great job. But
is that an art?
It is. I think so much of photography I can see through my camera, but if it's not executed on the other half, which is the developing and printing, then of course the thought is lost, or the magic of the moment is not conveyed as it should be. So yeah, I think the other side of it, once I get back to Atlanta, which is where I'm based now, to get back to the office and us to execute what I had in my mind when I documented the wedding,
Dennis,
is very important.
Is your art, Denis Reggie's, being able to see things through that lens and knowing how it's going to come out in a finished picture, and utilizing this mechanical device, this camera? Is that what it is?
I think the idea, and I think the reason clients seek me out, is that I can make the camera sort of just be almost the unseen, but I can use it as a tool almost blindly, in the sense that I'm not even aware of it. I'm really more plugged into the wedding in a nonverbal way. I'm sort of cruising around, sensing and feeling. It's a very mental thing for me, and I think clients want me to go to their weddings, their daughters' weddings or whatever, and to sort of plug in and catch and capture the moments that really tell the story without a caption, without any verbiage. Let the image capture. It may well be something of the mother of the bride might have her hands clasped against her chest while the bride's cutting the cake, and I may not know what the exact caption is, but I have a sense of it, as I think other people would that are looking for it, that the bride's mother is thinking of maybe when she cut her cake 28, 32 years before.
Is there a tension involved when you cover one of these weddings, when you photograph for you?
It's pressure. I mean, I'm almost 1,400 weddings into this, if you can believe, but still on the Friday night or the night before, there's a little anxiety there. I mean, certainly because, I certainly know what I'm doing, I like to think, but nonetheless, each wedding is different, and I think it brings the challenge of knowing that I can't reshoot this. It has to be right the first time. I must be creative. Saturday morning, 11:30, whatever. It's on demand. I must be creative and good and sensitive. I can't reschedule if I'm not up to it, or I can't reshoot it if the photos aren't there. So it's a pressure shoot.
What might you see when you develop these pictures that cause you dissatisfaction? What might you say? I'm just curious, what would Denis Reggie feel were flaws? Give one example.
I like to be able to look at a series of images and have a sense of the day and the personality. What I'm trying to avoid is something that looks predictable, a series of images that could have been anyone's wedding. That's why I avoid the bride gazing at the bouquet or the groom looking at his ring or any of the kitsch or corny or predictable images, the sort of the pseudo-funny images. Those are not of interest to me. I think my aim, and of course for me to feel like I've done my job, comes about when I can look at a series of images and really have a feel for that couple's personality, for the family's warmth, for genuine moments that are not posed. I think with your eye, and Gus, I've always admired your eye with your creative side as well, I think you can look at an image and know whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And I think for me, my mission is to capture in a non-fictional sense what actually happened, the inside story without hocus pocus and without prompting or staging, enhancing, improving,
Should
adjusting.
the photographer be unobtrusive?
I think it's the requisite mandate. I think, however, some brides want the photographer to be more of almost the wedding coordinator, tell them when and even how to cut the cake and so on. Then other brides, the ones that tend to gravitate toward what I'm up to, they're looking for their photographer not so much to be the leader, but rather the follower, the unobtrusive follower.
Is poignancy hard to capture?
I think that
moment, that something that's right on the verge of a tear, is that hard to?
It's something that I want to not insinuate myself into the situation at those moments. And there are so many delicate moments. First off, these people are opening their homes to me, which I know I'm a father and I have an 11-year-old, soon to be 11-year-old daughter, and I can only imagine when that day comes, for me and for us, that it's a very special time for me to have to hand her over to this guy, and I know he'll be a great guy, but nonetheless, it's a very special moment for a photographer to be in the same space, the same room, for him to be privy and able to see and even document with a camera, maybe emotions or tears. I think that there has to be a trust factor.
It's hard to capture with words, and I gather it's not so simple to capture with a camera either. The camera sounds so simple to the uninitiated. You press down and there's the moment captured. Not so, huh?
No, I think that the technological side needs to be understood and mastered, and there's so many things we can do nowadays. Again, we talked about technology earlier, but films and so on allow us to work without the flash and so on. So I think mastering the camera is, to me, it's maybe a third of the way there in terms of the pursuit of photography, and I tell this to the 3 other photographers that work with me. Let's understand the technical side, but to me it's 2/3 right brain, it's intuition. So we know how to take a picture. Okay, we're a third of the way there. But the other 2/3 is to know what or why or when or where or exactly what our mission is. So I spend a lot more time with the right brain forward, looking for interesting moments, and then when I see one, let the left brain tell me how to take the picture.
Denis, tell me about one of the great social events of any year, the wedding of John F. Kennedy Jr. and Miss Bissett at the time. Tell us about that wedding.
Well, first, I was just honored to get the phone call from them. I had photographed John's sister, Caroline's wedding back in '86, I guess it was. So during the Olympics in Atlanta, I was working and doing photography and so on in normal business, but I got a call one day at home from John Kennedy, which I was stunned. He doesn't normally call me, although I've met him sort of socially at these weddings and all. His bride-to-be, Carolyn, he says, listen, I've got a top-secret question. I thought, well, could this be? And sure enough, within a matter of seconds, I knew, but it was to be held in great secrecy. So that was in July or August. Here comes September, I think it was the 21st or 20th. I fly down to Jacksonville and then drive up to this little remote island. 38 people. In fact, I rode the little boat launch with maybe half the wedding party, the wedding guests, and 19 people or so. We kind of went on a boat up to Cumberland Island. It was magical, and I think his mother would have been very proud because with a name like John Kennedy Jr., I think people have certain expectations.
But you said not ostentatious at all.
In fact, quite the opposite. Incredibly tasteful, but the natural flowers of the island, not very orchestrated or not overdone in any way. I think the beauty, the natural beauty, was really at the foundation of the beauty of this whole event. The moss-laden oaks and the wind blowing and no electricity in this little ancient chapel and
very romantic, the ultimate. Now, how about, you just did the photograph Vice President Gore's and Tipper's daughter's wedding.
Another honor, I mean, to say the least.
What kind of an experience was that?
Well, again, there, for me as a photographer, of course, having the Vice President's family hire is certainly a great honor. But in addition, Mrs. Gore, Tipper Gore, is quite an accomplished photographer.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I knew that she would have a certain strong thought process, and again, a little added pressure for the photographer to do it. Well, a little pressure, yeah. But of course, as a wedding photographer, we're sort of accustomed to a little bit of pressure.
That was in the National Cathedral?
It was, which is where they were married. The Vice President and Mrs. Gore were married back in 1970. Corinna, age 23 and absolutely beautiful. And I do mean inside and out. I had a chance to get to know her over the months before her wedding, and I actually had a chance to photograph her doing some of the fittings. Vera Wang, the wonderful bridal gown designer, did her dress in New York, and her mother would come by, and I'd sort of be in the shadows photographing as they were doing the fitting. And of course, occasionally Mrs. Gore's camera would come out of her purse, and she'd want to get in on the action of documenting as well. But her daughter, Corinna, is such a sweetie. And then Drew Schiff, the physician, I guess 30 years old or so, they met in New York and dated, and their wedding was just wonderful. The president came by. He was just back from the big, I guess, the NATO conference in Europe, and he came by for the reception. The cathedral was magnificent. The vice president's residence, really their home, it was a great setting, I think, to use. I had a chance to meet Corinna's younger sisters and her brother, Albert.
Tell us about one of those spectacular, I was about to say rock and roll weddings, but I don't want to denigrate it. You photographed the wedding of Don Henley of the Eagles.
It was great.
What was that like?
Well, you're talking to somewhat of a music buff here, so when I got the call first, I thought it was one of my buddies playing a joke on me, but no, it's Don's manager in Los Angeles. Flew out to Malibu, 500 people, spectacular tent set up, and Don Henley, never been married, he's late in his 40s, I guess, and has this beautiful woman, Sharon Summerall, who was a model that I remember from the Eileen Ford days when she was a model a few years before, where they're going to get two Texans. They're going to get married in Malibu, which is at their ranch out there, and set up a beautiful tent. Well, as their wedding guests, as you can imagine, for a famous rock and roll star like Don Henley of the Eagles, they've got Sting and Bruce Springsteen and Tony Bennett and Sheryl Crow and Bruce Hornsby and Glenn Frey. Well, these people take their turns at the wedding reception, getting up from their tables, walking over to the microphone. There's a full band there, and they just go right into the entertainment. It was absolutely, musically speaking, it was, in my 1,400 weddings, my 22 years of this, but far and away the most extraordinary wedding from a performance point of view of all time. Interesting little sidebar for the Louisiana audience here. I'm always cruising around as I do, and I go to the kitchen to see all the preparations. Well, there's Emeril Lagasse, the crown prince of New Orleans cuisine, in the back. Don and Sharon had fallen in love with his cooking, as so many of us have, and they apparently flew him out to do the preparations for the reception. That was an extraordinary wedding, not only in terms of size and numbers and extravagance, but just it was exciting because of all the entertainment and the fun, and of course the two's energy sort of set the tone for the rest of the day. Another one I was honored to do. By the way, that one, Gus, Don and his fiancee wanted all black and white, so which I love. Black and white's always been very near and dear to my heart, so I loaded up a bunch of black and white film and flew out to California with a couple of my other shooters, and we had a great time of it, and the images were, to me, very interesting and different. I have a number of my clients nowadays, and I guess over the past several years, but now more than ever, maybe a third or sometimes even a half in a given year, that want black and white coverage, because it is different, and it's sort of that Life magazine era. I looked at the Kennedys and others when they were growing up in Life magazine, and the political and the celebrity types of the 60s and 70s in my youth, and I thought, wow, it's such a journalistic look, black and white photojournalism. That really is a great part of the inspiration that I brought into my own modern wedding photojournalism. It's this Life magazine look of people being themselves, like an inside glimpse. I mean, we can all remember the shots of Carolyn and John in the Oval Office, sort of running around, or just shots of just famous people being natural.
John F. Kennedy saluting at
that terrible moment. Did that, talk about a touching moment, saluting his father at age, I guess he was 3 years old or something. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
And now you've also photographed royalty at their weddings. What kind of experience is that, Dennis? Crowley is very limited on royalty.
Yes.
Lafayette's got some. Crowley not so much.
Yeah, this wasn't Mardi Gras. This is the real thing. Of course, I was, my heart's going a mile a minute. I've done the von Furstenberg, the Prince Prince Alexander von Furstenberg's bride, Alexandra Miller, Alex and Alex, Prince and Princess to me, but they're friends, you know, Alex and Alex. Spectacular event. They were, the bride being from Hong Kong, the groom being from Austria. They sort of met in New York and decided to get married in New York. So in this royal way, they sort of go to the city of New York and petition and, in essence, rent Battery Park right there across from the Statue of Liberty. They rent the entire bottom section of this peninsula and set up and construct this fabulous tent, almost like a Hollywood set or a Broadway set almost. And the setting was just absolutely remarkable, and of course, celebrities and so on, but from all over the world, very international crowd, a lot of Europeans, a lot of the smokers, you can always tell the Europeans and all, beautiful women and just beautiful people in general. But again, my MO, my photography style is much the same, which is quiet, no conversation. I'll bet I work 12-hour days and say not a word, especially around royalty and so on. Of course, I like to read my books of etiquette and all to know the proper ways to do what I need to do.
Which fork to use.
You know, exactly. Well, I'm not even eating at the weddings, but yeah, exactly.
Dennis, how about diamonds? Have you jewelry? Have you seen some out-of-this-world jewelry?
I've seen some that you wonder how the bride can raise her left hand. Yeah, just absolutely extraordinary. And this, it's a long way from Crowley, and I never forget, you know, how close I am to my roots and all. But I've seen some amazing things, Gus, and it seems like every weekend it's always something. And if not the fabulous, huge rocks, which I do have a chance to see, sometimes it's just the simplest things, which to me are so fun. And by the way, not all my clients are celeb and high profile, but I think each bride, to me, you know, considers a day to be so special, and I certainly do. I consider it to be my absolute #1 priority when I'm there, in the sense that I plan for it, I look for moments, and it may well be found something as simple as the twinkle of an eye, or maybe the sparkle from a rock. But I'm going to look.
You're such a delightful
for
and talented man. I want to ask you, have you maintained friendships with any of those people, or is it just a relationship of the moment?
Actually, not so much before the wedding, but afterwards. And by the way, I might say by design. I find that for me to do my best work at a wedding, it's best to be an unknown. It's best to sort of blend in and not be seen or even thought of. However, after the wedding, a lot of my work and interrelations with these couples sort of begins because it's the process of editing the photographs, and I help them with the design of an album, which I'll certainly be a part of, and the binding, and of course the final delivery. So in the post-wedding period, yes, I have built some great friendships where I keep in touch, and they'll call when they're in Atlanta, or if they're coming down to Louisiana and want some restaurant recommendations, I'll get a call.
What about security at some of these very wealthy people, or high society and so on, government officials? Is that very much a factor at many of these occasions?
It is. In fact, at the recent Gore wedding, not only myself, but my team of I have 2 other shooters and also 2 logistical people. All of us, you know.
I bet you didn't call them shooters at that.
No, we didn't use the word shooting. No. Very good. Yeah, we thought about that.
Apprentices.
You're quick. You're quick. My apprentices. But it's all, you know, so we had to get Secret Service clearance. You know, they actually have a little file, I guess, on everyone. They do it by your birth date and social security number, and of course they check and send someone to your hometown and check on you and all that sort of thing.
Was that the heaviest security that you've gone through with?
I photographed the president a couple of times at other weddings, and it's typically the same routine. The Secret Service gets involved. Some of these private events for some of these corporate CEOs and the billionaire families that I'll occasionally get hired by have I'd say security that rivals even the president's.
Private security.
All private, yeah, but it's very, very strong. And as well, I think it should be for some of these international corporate types and all, but that's part of it.
Has anything ever happened at one of those weddings that frightened you, that you thought that something had happened, unplanned, unexpected? Have you ever had a frightening experience?
No, but of course it's always, sometimes in my mind, what if something crazy happened? But no, thank knock on wood, nothing's really happened. I've been concerned from a photography point of view. Some of the weddings I do, I'll get a lot of advance phone calls from the tabloids who want to buy. I'm not a paparazzi. I'm actually hired by the clients, obviously, but I'll get calls from these tabloid newspapers wanting to buy film, and we'll give you 6-figure money and put your kids through college if you just let us have 10 negatives, this type of thing. And of course the answer, it never even gets to me. My assistant will block it and say, no, not available. But at the wedding, I never, because I've heard of this happening, where a waiter will be given several $100s or even more to go buy my camera cases or the photographer's camera cases and just, you know, swipe the film. So there's always a concern from a security point of view of something crazy happening where film would be taken and then end up appearing in a tabloid unbeknownst to me. Of course, that's never happened, but then again, we safeguard against that by actually having
the tabloids are surely one of the more wretched inventions of our lifetime.
And I think getting worse, Gus. I mean, I've done this now for 22 years. 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't so much an issue at these weddings. Nowadays, helicopters are not uncommon, and it's just they should realize that it greatly diminishes, I think, the ambiance of a wedding to have this noise of this whirlybird, this helicopter above. Or I can think of some of the Kennedy ones I've done for Ted Jr. in Block Island, the Ted Kennedy Jr. Beautiful wedding, but we're being chased by, I think it was Hard Copy or one of these tabloid syndicated shows, being chased by their helicopter at this estate where the wedding was, so that they could get their footage for the evening, broadcast. I think it's unfortunate. I think that they should recognize that even people that are public in one sense, I think deserve a private wedding. I mean, if not
at
then...
At least that moment.
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, please.
Dennis, I want to thank you for joining us on Louisiana Legends. You're probably the youngest person whom we've interviewed in the 15 years that we've done this program. And your delight, and I know how proud your folks must be of you, because you've done it right. And,
You're so kind.
And it's a pleasure to be with you,
My
son.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the
Dennis.
show. I'm honored.
Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This important program series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of a state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for 60 years.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or send 1995 to Louisiana Legends, care of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery.